Welcome to the AI in Healthcare panel. As everybody knows, there's a lot going on in healthcare. I'm not even talking about COVID-19, but the healthcare industry, of course, has been seeing major movements in new technologies being incorporated in pharma, in healthcare settings, hospitals, clinical trials. It's a very interesting area, and we are going to talk with a couple of people about this, their perspectives on the opportunities there, how they see the future developing, how they approach certain of these companies and potential partners in this field, and that's what the panel is all about. So let's first take a look who is on the panel. So we have Amin Ben Moussa, we have Baudouin Fouet, and we have Alan Daisley, and from Life Science Nation, Joey and Claire Young are also present. I myself, Ronald Doornbos from Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and I want to start with a short introduction of all the panel members. And Amin, maybe we could start with you. Amin is in Morocco, Rabat, currently under lockdown and having some communication breakdowns, but hopefully we can hear Amin when he is going off mute. If Amin is not available, then let's do Baudouin first. Baudouin is in Paris.
Hello. Yes, hello everyone. That's Baudouin Hu. I'm a partner at Cap Décisif. Cap Décisif is a venture capital firm established in Paris since 2001. And we mainly invest in two sectors, which are digital at large, so SaaS B2B consumer apps, but we also invest in life science, and I'm part of that team, investing in drugs, medical devices, and diagnosis. And we've been investing in the field of digital health for about 13, 14 years now. And in 2018, we've raised a specific fund dedicated to digital health, involving several corporate investors along with us in the fund, and having stakeholders all across the chain of the healthcare sector, from hospitals to medical device companies, to payers, to patient associations. So we are very much looking at AI applied to healthcare, and so far 2 of our 3 deals have been considering companies applying AI to healthcare. So I'll be glad to provide some testimony.
Yeah, maybe in a moment we can also hear a little bit more about those companies that you're already investing in. Could you also tell a little bit more about your own background?
So I'm an engineer myself, what the French call a general engineer. I also completed an MBA course. I've worked for a global testing inspection company called Bureau Veritas, involved in many different sectors, including medical device. And I joined Cap Décisif 6 years ago to take part of the life science team.
Okay, great. A very impressive career. Alan Daisley, can we hear your background and a little bit about what you do now?
Yes, hi everyone, Alan Daisley. For the past couple of years, I've been managing director of Startup Bootcamp Digital Health in Miami. Startup Bootcamp is a global network of accelerator and entrepreneur support programs. Our model is to find and recruit top tier technology companies in a certain industry. In Miami, it's we have a healthcare program, digital health specifically, and then we create an ecosystem around those entrepreneurs where we find investors, mentors, and we put them through a curriculum that helps them develop as rapidly as possible and maximizes their chance for success. So we do an initial seed investment, and then we also reserve the right to do a follow-on investment. Usually we're very early, so it's sort of up to 100K or so, and then we look to participate in follow-on rounds at again about that amount, but then we leverage our network of investor partners to help create larger rounds. So Startup Bootcamp across the globe, we have several verticals. There's healthcare, there's insurance, there's food tech, there's fashion tech, there's sports tech, there's anything that you can imagine. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're really looking at digital health and how we can find technologies that are really impacting the betterment of healthcare, both here and around the globe. So looking for brilliant ideas paired up with some sort of technology that gets them to market better, faster, cheaper, and helps them and helps create new companies.
Right, and a little bit about your own background?
My personal background, so before this, I actually founded and ran another accelerator on the medical device side in Memphis, Tennessee, called 0 to 510. And prior to that, my background, I guess like Baudouin, is computer engineer, spent initial years in technology, software development, project management, IT consulting all across the globe with companies like Accenture and IBM. Moved over to the healthcare space several years ago, and after having done a couple startups myself, ended up with the opportunity to start looking and investing in and helping other new entrepreneurs in healthcare to really take their destiny into their own hands and create companies. So that's what I've been doing.
Right, also an impressive career. So I just noticed that Amin has unfortunately left the call. Like I said earlier, in Morocco, there's some problems with communication. They're going on lockdown this evening at 6 o'clock, and apparently the net there is overfilled with calls and communication. So hopefully he comes back. Then we will do an introduction of Amin as well. Till then, let's just continue the discussion. Little introduction about myself. I'm Ronald Doornbos. I was the head of innovation management and scouting at Takeda Pharmaceuticals till recently. I'm now exploring some other opportunities, not sure yet what I'm going to do, but it might be also very much related to digital things like AI, machine learning in the healthcare and pharmaceutical setting. I regularly give talks, keynotes on that subject: AI in healthcare, AI in pharmaceutical industry, drug development, clinical trials. And I'm very fascinated about this field. Have been following this field for the last, say, 10 years or so. Was a consultant before. Also, as a consultant, I work with several companies, including large industries, to help them also with their digital programs. I have a background in microbiology and neuroscience, neuroscience postdoc at Harvard for about 6-7 years in Parkinson's and schizophrenia, genetics of aggression. But then about 10 years ago, moved into industry. And since that move, I've been mostly doing project management, consulting, and business development, much related to innovation. And that's also how I got into this field of AI, machine learning, and digital health. So without further ado, some of the things that we would like to talk about. And Baudouin, maybe I can start with you. Can you share anything about what you see as some of the most exciting developments that are going on in current space in healthcare, pharmaceutical, related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital health?
Yeah, well, I think what is very interesting about artificial intelligence is that we have proven demonstration that AI algorithms can be superior to human for repetitive tasks or tasks involving an important quantity of information, sometimes complex, and getting a specific decision from this information. And I see, for example, one big impact there regarding medical imaging, which is, of course, one of the areas that was first tackled by AI. A lot of development was made on computer vision and the way AI could be used to analyze pictures, and this can be, of course, very easily translated to imaging. So there have been a lot of work undergone specifically at the crossroads of one imaging modality that could be a CT scan, MRI, X-ray, echo, mammography, and applied to a very specific clinical context, which could be cancer detection, which could be any sort of medical condition which can be observed on imaging. So now we do see on the market, on the investment market, dozens and dozens of software editors which have proven the use and the superiority of their tools compared to radiologists, of course, with some controversy, as you can guess. And the question now is how hospitals will be able to cope with those new solutions. But this is altogether, I think, very interesting because the value it provides to MDs, of course, doctors, they will never be replaced by machines. I mean, not immediately, at least. This gives a lot of room for them to focus on those patients which actually need their, I would say, analysis, and keep triage and I would say first level of analysis to AI. So that's quite promising in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think especially in the image analysis field, where you see that algorithms are basically doing a better job than some of the best specialists in the world. That's really taking a lot of work out of the hands also of the specialist that can then focus also on other things. So I think that's a great development. And what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting area for sure. AI is going to have a huge impact on providers. Some of the things that we have been looking at in the interesting market we have here in Miami are some patient-centered interventions. So using AI to engage patients to help solve problems that are currently costing the healthcare system a lot of money. And so, for example, you know, you don't show up for an appointment. Well, is there a way that we can figure out that you have a problem that will make you not show? Because that's expensive. Or if you have an operation, no-shows are extremely high for some reason. And then sometimes you show up, but you show up and you've eaten and you were supposed to not eat for 8 hours before the operation. So we're really looking for some of the technologies and some of the things that I've found that are really interesting as, you know, if we can intervene in an intelligent way with the patient to help these high cost incidences. The other kind of flip side of that is the compliance of a patient. So can you make sure that they're taking their medication? Can you verify that they're in it? And that way we can stop them from coming back to hospital with a readmission that we're now liable for.
Yeah, no, I agree. Any other things that you would like to add, or?
So I think the other thing is, you know, we're starting to see it really blossom out into every area. So, you know, we talked about patients, we talked about clinicians, their hospital systems. You know, the more data that we collect these days, now you can do things like hotspotting to figure out where you're having a shortage of staff, or if there's an anomaly going on. Right now, COVID-19 is the big thing. Well, you know, how can we figure out more about, you know, where the incidences of the disease are and where we're vulnerable. So AI, given the data that we have, we can now really look at things like that. On the medical device side, you know, I was deep in medical device for a while. What I'm noticing with medical device companies now is they want to put some sensing technology into their implants so that they can track and trace them, and also look at things like, you know, how is the implant holding up? You know, how is the patient's body holding up? Is there a reason why there was a failure? And now that we can have more and more of this data, AI is just going to be everywhere because we're going to have the information, the data gathering in all aspects of healthcare.
No, I completely agree, and I see also, like Boudoir was also already saying, image analysis, but especially for monitoring of patients, remote monitoring with all the wearables and all the gadgets that are around now. That's coming in, and of course AI in the background can also help with really predicting when interventions are needed, so already take action before the patient even knows that something is going wrong. There's other things that before were not used for diagnosis, but for example, voice analysis, where companies are using the voice as kind of a hallmark signature for certain, for example, neurological conditions. The same is being done with keystroke analysis, where small programs in the background of, for example, an iPad or your phone basically measure your keystroke behavior and can vary. It's almost scary how precise they can predict that you're going to have some neurological problem in the future just based on the way you're typing your messages. Other things, of course, EEG analysis, breathing analysis, heart rate, cardiogram analysis, movement analysis, for example, for Parkinson's patients or for people with depression, where you really can see that AI can see those differences that normally would not be picked up by human beings. And those are really, yeah, great achievements and great progress is being made in all these areas. So maybe take to another part of the conversation, the strategy for yeah, embracing, implementing, investing in these new technologies, because there's obviously a lot going on, and not all that is going on is true, is real. There's a lot of hype. So how do you pick those yeah, the winning horses from those ones that are going to be left behind or are not really doing what they are telling that they are doing? How do you go about that? Baudouin, can you maybe give your perspective on that?
Well, as often for any new market or new technology, we are always looking at teams that can master on one hand the technology itself. So you know, you need this sort of specific competence and scarce resource today called data scientists, and we have the chance in France at least to have a very good computer science engineers that are very well trained to mathematics. So that's quite helpful. And looking at the cost of those resources in France compared to other markets like the US, I think we are quite lucky here because we can really find interesting profiles of senior developers at really at affordable price. And the other thing we also need to have in mind is how this technology will be applied on which specific market. And there we need as well professionals being in those industries, knowing the issues of customers or patients or medical teams that will be using those solutions. So we are always looking at a balance between sectorial knowledge and a technological knowledge. And one of the usual bias is that people that think they have the data and they will find they'll be able to build magical data analysis tools that will find actual problems. So that's usually the engineer's bias. You know, they have a technology, they know they can do something about building a solution, and they are actually looking for a problem for their solution. And we always start the other way around. We are looking for an unmet medical need or some inefficiency in the way care is organized. And then we look how relevant AI is to solve this particular problem. So that's the overall approach. And then with AI, I mean, we all have probably a common definition of AI, but there are certain different types of artificial intelligence in the way this has been developed by science over time. Some AIs which are called ontology, those are not relying on a massive collection of data. This is based on knowledge and decision trees. Okay, so that's, I would say, applying specific rules to a given situation. But then I think what most of us speak casually as AI is the use of machine learning or deep learning on very large data sets. And there also we need to ensure that sufficient data is available. We can get this data, quality data, as structured as possible, as annotated as possible, in order to build the actual products. Okay, and that's where the data scientists will be focusing. And then once we have built this particular product, we need to make sure that we'll be able to have this technology adhering to the specific regulatory requirements, whether this is just a decision support tool or if this becomes a medical device, there will be consequences on the way the technology will be built and will be versioned and improved. So those are all the things we are considering. And and lately, the final point, probably the most challenging one, is to make sure that these new technologies we are providing to the market, they are of course disruptive, but they don't disturb too much the way medical tools or healthcare organizations are running. Okay, because we need to make sure we are fit to the actual workflows, and the cultural change that will be required will not be too strong. Otherwise, these solutions will never scale up.
Absolutely, and you mentioned many things that in itself can a couple of hours of discussion. You already mentioned, for example, regulatory framework, things like bias in the results. How do you validate? I mean, there's many issues that need to be tackled before you really can develop something. So Alan, maybe you can also give your your feedback on this.
Yeah, certainly. So those are some good points. I share a lot of the sentiment there. As we look at what we embrace and how we sort of pick what we want to invest in, there's several ways that we go about that. One is we have several partnerships with healthcare providers, and we really try and get in tune with what the issues are, what their pain points are, what solutions they're looking for. And so that gives us a little bit of a leg up in terms of, okay, we know we have a customer for this, so let's go, invest in something that we know will have a customer on the other end. So that's in the easiest sense. But things that we look at specifically are, new trends or new regulations that maybe change the way of doing things, and therefore cause a pain point. And at that point, usually your providers are ready to listen because they have a problem that they want to solve. So, in the US here in particular, there are things like this new, well, it's not new anymore, but the value-based medicine. So so there's this whole idea of having to show performance and showing that you've provided the best care for the least price and you've gotten the best results. And so that there becomes a premium on showing your work. So what have you done? How did you track it? All of these things, and that creates a lot more work. And so you start looking at one of the issues that I think you had mentioned before, this whole idea of physicians who are spending a lot of time entering data into electronic health records. Well, if somebody could come up with an AI system that would help dictate or interpret or help reduce errors in terms of getting things into the system, because the error rates that you have going in there, not only are you taking up a lot of physician time, but if a tired physician is doing it and he codes it wrong, then you don't get the right billing, and that costs the hospital money. And so so things like that, these are kind of the complex problems that we look at. If there's an AI solution that can help reduce costs or save time or really address a high cost area. I talked earlier about patient compliance, which non-compliance can lead to readmissions. And when you have a readmission, patient comes back within 30 days for specific things that you were supposed to have treated, then even though it's not your fault because the patient didn't take their medicine, then you still are on the hook. You're responsible for that, the cost of that episode. So we look at things like that. We also look, like what I was alluding to, at if it's a nice solution, no matter how nice it is, if it doesn't fit into the workflow, if it doesn't fit into the organization, then it's not going to be adopted. And sometimes, if we can't see a way that this solution, even though it's great, they're never going to use it because it's the culture of that organization is not conducive to adopting that, then that's a problem for us as well.
No, absolutely, yeah. No, and I agree with all these points that both you, Baudouin and Alan made. But what I also would like to know, and I think that's also of interest, because RESI redefined early stage investment. There's a lot of early stage companies that are also looking, well, how can we position ourselves better? How can we really be the ones that how can we position ourselves in such a way that the investors are interested in really working with us, that the pharma companies, the healthcare institutions see us as the right partner? Because for all those things that you mentioned, there is at least a dozen, probably more companies around there that offer these kind of services or platforms. How do you then go about finding the right partner? And how do you make sure that the one you bet on is the right one to go with? So maybe Alan, you want to go first this time?
Sure. So first and foremost, for me, you have to have a solution that is focused on an actual problem that you validated. What I don't want is a solution that's looking for a problem, and I think it's very tempting to sort of throw the words AI around and Bitcoin and and anything that's hot or blockchain. Blockchain is a wonderful technology, but there's certain solutions or certain problems that it's not the right solution for, or it's years away from being the right solution for. And so just having a realization of that is the first thing I look for in an entrepreneur. The second thing would be, as you look at the problem, how big is the problem? If the universe of customers for this problem is 10, and the value of that solution to each of them is $1,000, then that's really easy math. There's a market size of 10 times 1,000, not very big, so not very interesting. And that's just a fact of being an investor. You invest so you can multiply the money that you've invested, and so the math has to work. So beyond a real problem that has a significant market size, then the team. I'd love to see that you have actually validated this problem. The best selling line to me is that I already have a customer. Here you can call them. And I realize not everybody has an initial customer, especially in the early stage, but the best kind of validation, and even if that customer isn't necessarily paying you yet, the fact that somebody thinks that there's some value here, that really gets me interested. So I look at those, and then just if the team is credible, there's somebody on the team who actually knows something about this space, or you have a rock star advisor or somebody who can really stand behind this and say, well, this is a credible thing, then those are the initial things that get me interested in terms of having a conversation with an early stage company that doesn't have a ton of business yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. Baudouin, maybe you can also add your.
Yeah, I think Alan said it all. We have, I think, the same way to assess and select companies. Well, the value for customers and bringing an actual solution to an actual problem. That's really what we are looking for, and that's usually what great teams can do. So that's I think very much aligned with the way we look at companies. One thing which is interesting though is the way healthcare as it is, it's just an aggregate of very niche markets. So some could be very high margin, high value markets, but this is still an aggregation of niche markets, dealing with patients with a lot of different types of conditions. With the rise of digital health, we can find some companies which are positioned to become platforms, and that's also something we are looking at, meaning we have one particular product which is using one data set, and with this particular data set, this particular product has been built. But maybe with the same core infrastructure and with the same data sets, we could build additional products which could be bringing different sort of solutions to the same patient base, or maybe addressing other patients with other needs. So that's also the way we want to look at things in terms of development strategy, and not having a one-shot value proposition, but maybe a stage approach to different value propositions to be triggered over time.
Yeah, more like a platform. And yeah, I agree. I also wanted to comment, because I agree with all you say. Alan was saying validation of solution very important, especially when they already have customers. That's something also. I think there's also a little bit of a caveat that sometimes you have companies, and I see that, for example, in companies around artificial intelligence in the drug development world, where some of these companies have closed multi-million-dollar deals with some of the big pharmaceutical industries, whereas these companies do not really have any tangible results yet. I mean, that may come, that may be just a couple of months away. Then it's also important that not everybody is following the route of the big pharmas that already, or the big investor companies that already invested in these companies. And I think that's something, especially for the investors also, to be very careful when there's a lot of hype and some of these companies get a lot of attention in the media and get a lot of traction from investors, from big pharma companies, that it's not necessarily the best bet. There might be companies that are operating under the radar, or that are not as well known, that do a much better job. And I think that's also something we should recognize. But it's very difficult, of course, for these companies that are under the radar or just coming out with their platforms to really get the attention of the advanced investors, especially in the current field, in the current environment where so many of companies are fighting for this attention. Maybe Baudouin and Alan, you can also say something on that.
Yeah, well, the thing with digital health and AI is of course part of that segment. Is we are looking at digital solutions which could be sometimes much quicker to develop and to access the market compared to medical devices or drugs, of course. And from their background, entrepreneurs usually compare themselves to other non-healthcare digital companies, and they tend to have expectations regarding valuations and also speed of development and speed of use of the proceeds of the investments, which are indeed very much aligned to the SaaS golden rules, but maybe not aligned to the healthcare market. So we are in a context where we do have to develop a digital product, but this is to be placed on the healthcare market. And commercial traction will not be as fast as with any other standard B2B solution, which will be ROI driven. Okay, it will take maybe much longer for the company to massify its commercial rollout, and therefore we as investors we need to be careful, first on the time it will take, and second on the quantity of financing this requires. Okay, and the bottom line is that this will have an impact on valuations, and my warning to entrepreneurs is that it's probably better to compare yourselves to your peers in the medical device industry rather than your peers in any other digital sector.
Yeah, Alan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, that's really interesting and a good point, because it definitely it just takes so long. I mean, you're trying to sell into a hospital, you're trying to sell into a big insurer or something like that. It's you really have to have just an amazing value proposition to get them to move with any kind of speed. And their budgets, you may just get slotted into next year's budget, which immediately adds 12 months to your runway pre-revenue, and and most companies just can't survive that. So I think those are good words of wisdom. Some of the things that we suggest also, and in terms of the way we approach this, is, you know, we like to look at things that could potentially get in faster. So, you know, if there's a way that you can have something that doesn't require installation in the IT system at the hospital, which means you have another gatekeeper and you have to go through the IT department, and there are all these things that need to be done, and you can get told no at so many steps along the way. If you have a way to, you know, have a cloud, secure cloud application, and it's a login that doesn't require installation in the particular server environment at that hospital, then maybe you're getting the ability to get there a little bit faster. If you can have a sort of a SaaS model, as opposed to, you know, something that is, you know, and charged by the month at something, you know, in the low thousands, as opposed to trying to get $100,000 up front in as sort of some of the EHRs and things do, then it makes the barriers of adoption easier. So as we think about how we can get in, and how the companies we can get in, what their prospects of success are, we look at all these things, because yes, you're absolutely right. It's tough, it's long, and you have to be able to survive.
No, I agree with all you said, and of course, hospital insurance companies to, like you said, to convince these organizations of the value can take a really long time, because it needs to go across many different levels of those organizations. So I think also for hospitals, they of course see the value: patient monitoring, patient tracking, improving adherence, clinical trials that you can think of, where AI can be a major factor that can make things more efficient. For the insurance companies, of course, saving money, value-based healthcare was already mentioned. For them, also very interesting. I would also like to take you to the pharma industry, that of course also plays a very important role in this sector. How do you see the appetite of the pharma industry for AI? And maybe Baudouin, Alan, I know you're both in the investment world. I can also give my 2 cents on that, but maybe after you give your thoughts, I can add something as well. Baudouin?
Yeah, well, I mean, AI is a component again of digital solutions which can help the pharma industry. There is a wealth of opportunities for digital and digital health entrepreneurs to address the pharma industry, and they have specific needs, you know, needs that can be very specific to their business as a pharma company, or to optimize drug discovery, drug development, clinical trials, as you mentioned. But there is also a set of standard tools which can be used for the pharma industry for all of their support functions, you know, HR, sales, finance, and so on. I think some of the uses I've seen which are quite interesting is of course the way we could simulate the activity of specific compounds on a given target. So there is a lot of development ongoing on that aspect, and this will serve the discovery and R&D functions of the pharma industry. There are also interesting solutions to optimize the way clinical trials are being conducted, and we know this is a very expensive and very unpredictable area of expenditures for pharma. Okay, so I do see some interesting companies in that space that will help them refine what will be the best clinical centers for this particular study based on the very specific patient recruitments. So that's I think another area where the pharma industry has a lot of value to get.
Right. How about you, Alan? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, this is a hugely interesting area, and as you said, things like the drug discovery is now making leaps and bounds in terms of speed to development of compounds. You sort of discover a molecule or select a molecule from a database, and there's a lot that's out there. But as you have scientists who are trying to zero in on treatments for specific conditions, then you can now use software to to test those molecules and rotate them and see how they attach to the targets and really refine your discovery to get it to a point where you can look at millions of molecules in almost no time flat, just because you've got this new technology, and it's really changing the speed to market for these drugs. What's been interesting as we've talked to some of the pharma companies and the companies that work with drug delivery is that now that we're seeing more and more data being collected in terms of being able to do real-time monitoring of blood glucose and things like that, we're seeing the interest to be able to use an artificial intelligence infrastructure to do things like sense and deliver. So, how can you in real time take action on a body condition, and however you sense it, whether it's looking at blood or some other biomarker, your heart rate or respiration or whatever it might be, and then have that drug be able to be delivered, and whether it's insulin that you have in a pouch or a patch or whatever it is. But it's getting more and more interesting in terms of being able to have a whole ecosystem where people can literally be taken care of through an intelligent infrastructure that can sense and react with the appropriate intervention. And it's really, really fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that as a highlight of what's going to be happening in the future.
Yeah, no, I think it's very having worked in the pharma industry quite some years now myself, I see a lot of different developments there. Obviously, drug development, drug discovery is one, but then there's a lot of other areas such as AI, used AI in the, for example, protein structure prediction, where also major strides are being made, and that of course helps with better understanding the target and really designing the molecules in such a way that you get that key lock model much better understood than before. AI in manufacturing, supply chain management, so really fine-tuning that, using things like 3D, augmented reality in the industry also really is taking off. You see things in production, education, collaborations, factory planning. In all those areas, AI is starting to play a role. And then, of course, also after going to market with a medication, pharmacovigilance, post-market surveillance, where AI can help to track everything that's going on in the social media platforms, for example, to quickly also pick up adverse events when they're happening. That's something that has taken off and is really being used by most of the pharma companies now. There's other examples. Well, we already earlier mentioned imaging, radiology, radiotherapy, but also things like litigation in the legal system, where pharma companies use artificial intelligence to basically already predict the outcome of certain problems that they are facing, to detect how those problems will play out, understanding their exposure, predicting legal outcomes. Scouting is another one. We're scouting for certain experts, but also scouting for novel technologies, scouting for certain trends, where AI can also be used and is being used today. So there's really a plethora of different examples to think of in the pharma industry. We then talk about the acceptance of AI in the pharma industry. I think that very much differs also from department to department. Pharma is not like the financial industry or like the commercial industry, retail, where you saw really a very quick update and quick adaptation to these new technologies. I think it's very much like the CEO of Novartis, Bas Narasimhan, said yeah, the pharma industry as a whole is basically a collection of turtles. You just need to make sure that you're the fastest turtle. And I think Novartis is one of the companies that is doing a reasonable job in really embracing new technologies, trying to incorporate them in their industry. Other companies as well. I mean, everybody's trying hard to implement these new tools. But obviously, it's a regulated industry. There's a lot of issues with security, with privacy. All these things that play a huge role working with patients, and something we need to keep in mind. And that's also what's causing many of these delays, apart from some of the conservatism and skepticism around these novel technologies. And that being said, I think there's a huge future for these in the industry, in the healthcare industry, as well as in the pharmaceutical industry. And maybe as a last point that we can touch on, you see as the most exciting developments that you think will really change the world in the next few years? And maybe Alan, I don't know who of you would like to go first, but whoever opens up the mic, I see Alan, please go ahead.
Okay. So, man, where do I start? There's so many things that I think hold huge promise for the future. One of the things that I got really excited about that I saw recently was a platform that basically it simulated the effect of external so medications and the like on the body. And so literally you could visualize the human body as an ecosystem, or as several ecosystems, and as you introduce things into that, it could show you the effects that it has on not only the one particular ecosystem, but on the larger body. So, you know, you look at put something in your gastrointestinal system, and then you look at it diffuse, and you could actually see how a drug, for example, would have what effect it would have, and it's a rapid way of creating a model that would be, you know, not half as invasive as actually doing a study. It could help you get to initial conclusions faster in terms of seeing how the drug, for example, affected the body. And what I really like about that is if you think about the implications of speed to market, of getting rid of things that are not going to work before you spend too much money on them, of being able to simulate even on a human model, a quote unquote human model, even before you kill the mouse or a rabbit or a pig. And so in my mind, as I look at artificial intelligence and the effect that it's going to have on us in the healthcare system, this is one of the things from a patient perspective, being able to rapidly develop treatments that are going to have a huge effect on us, getting to solutions faster, and then on top of that, this idea of looking at people as individuals. So, you know, given a particular DNA profile, you know, the dirty secret in pharma is that, you know, half the drugs out there only work for half the people and only half the time. And so so you have to play a lot with dosage and with one medicine versus another. And the holy grail would be if we can get to a place where, you know, we can all be profiled, we can all know how drugs are going to affect us as an individual, and be able to have precision medicine that will help get the right dose to us at the right time. And I think artificial intelligence and creating ecosystems like this, simulators like this, are going to have a really big effect on making that a reality.
Yeah, I agree. So, Baudouin, your take on that?
I think Alan is definitely reading my mind. That's
yes, he is mine, by the way. But yeah, go ahead.
I think indeed, precision medicine or personalized medicine will definitely be possible to some extent. Of course, it will not be general at the beginning, but yeah, we are definitely heading towards, I would say, 3 or 4 key functions that will help precision medicine, and as I mentioned, having drugs which are directly targeted to those individuals that will be responding well to those treatments. So we do see a lot of companies developing simulation tools, whether they be directly on surgery or whether they are as a prognosis for this particular biological drug versus this other biosimilar. So, and that's actually working quite well. We do see some solutions of advanced monitoring where you can fusion a lot of different data and identify very specific patterns of patients which could be at risk. And we also see some solutions where actual treatments can be adapted, and sometimes in patients where patients are fully autonomous with their drug, and the fine-tuning of the dosage or of the time where they can use the drug itself. So I think we'll be seeing more and more integrated care where patients, they will be followed all across their treatment. And what is, of course, I think most important is how we as individuals we can remain in state of well-being. So maybe the priority will be developing these solutions to patients which are actually suffering or initiating a lot of cost for healthcare systems, and usually for those patients it's easier to demonstrate that there is an actual positive impact. Okay, and I think gradually this will evolve as well towards well-being, and we see the giants, the Apples, the likes, developing consumer solutions, which I think are also starting from another angle, but aiming at the same goal. So that's, I think, yeah, very very interesting to see, and we are all generating a lot of data 24/7, and that will be, I think, a good use of this data.
No, thank you, Alan and Baudouin, for that. I think we're living in exciting and interesting times as far as for AI in pharma. Like you mentioned, AI-backed automated monitoring, administration of drugs, so that patients can really live a very high quality life because they're fully autonomous and they do not need to go to the doctors as often, and because everything basically can be automated to a certain extent. We're not there yet, but there's definitely a direction where we are going. Also, things like personalized precision medicine, profiling people to a degree that was unthinkable 10 years ago, is really making it possible to predict what people are going to be suffering from and to intervene already much earlier. I also like what Alan said, visualization of the body as an ecosystem, where you can really think of starting to do virtual clinical trials. Take enormous power and really supercomputers to do this kind of thing, but also, and I think that's for myself one of the very exciting things being developed, and that's kind of futuristic. I'm talking about quantum computing. I read one paper where they said, well, what will we do when the world's data hits 163 zettabytes in 2025? To give you an idea, that is watching the entire Netflix catalog close to 500 million times. So that's a lot of data. That's really a lot of data. So there's no human being on the planet that could ever dream of even do 1% of that data. But artificial intelligence can, of course, take a look at that and come up with conclusions, come up with relationships that we as humans are unable to find without those kind of tools. I think in 2018 that Google came up with a quantum computer that was already 100 million times faster than the laptops of that day. To give you an idea, back of the envelope, that means that that computer could do the same amount of calculations as your general laptop could do in, I believe it was something like 247,000 years. So that's a speed that is unthinkable. Obviously, we are not there yet. Quantum computing is still something that's mostly theoretical. But say that we could get there in maybe 10 years, then we can really start thinking about simulations, models of the entire human body. We can predict what people are going to have, but not only that, like Alan said, we can really predict to very high precision how people will respond to certain medications. And so I think, that's a great advancement. At the same time, for the hospitals, clinical trials and such, enrolling patients, for example, in clinical trials is something we did not really talk about, but that's for the clinical trials, of course, a huge thing, where you also see major strides being made by artificial intelligence companies to get these trials filled much faster. And there's many other things, way too many other things to mention right now because we are ending the hour of this conversation. Anything else that you would like to add, Baudouin, Ellen, before we close this panel?
Well, I think it's a very exciting space, and we are very happy to be at the forefront of it. We are early stage investors. Usually, we are the first VCs investing in those companies. And we are very much supportive with our entrepreneurs, helping them for several years to develop their technology and grow their firms. So very eager to meet you guys and discuss about your ventures.
Great, good one. Alan?
Well, likewise, I'm really excited about the possibilities in AI, and looking forward to see all the wonderful new technologies that are coming out. And I guess I just would like to reiterate that, really be sure as entrepreneurs that you're really trying to solve a problem that does exist, and that when you approach investors, that you can articulate what that problem is, what the size of it is, and how your solution really, how that value proposition really addresses that problem, and what your strategy is for getting in and growing it. The more intelligent that you can sound when you approach one of us, the better your chances are of creating a good relationship.
Yeah, and added to that, I think I completely agree with both Baudouin and Alan. That also when you have that, create great pitch ready to really show your value proposition and tell people about it. Keep it short, really keep it short, because you want to be to the point. And people like Alan, Baudouin, myself, we get hundreds of emails every week with all kinds of really wonderful ideas and wonderful propositions. But it's so much information that if it's not too short, then we cannot even start to go through all of it. Alan, you open the mic. Okay, so keep it short. And also, I think if you don't hear from us right away, like I said, we get a lot of communication, we get a lot of emails. So just try again. It's not anything personal that you don't hear from us. It's sometimes just because of the enormous amount of communication that we receive. So with that, I would really like to thank Alan Daisley from Miami, Baudouin Yu from Paris, and also Amin Ben Moussa, who unfortunately in Morocco could not stay on the panel because of communication issues, because of the situation with COVID-19. I would like to thank all of them to be on the panel and to help with this discussion. I also want to thank Joey Wong and Claire Young of Life Science Nation, who worked in the background to make this panel possible. And of course, thanks also to Life Science Nation for giving us this platform to have this discussion about AI in healthcare. And with that, I would like to close the panel. Thank you so much, everybody, and good luck in this world that is currently fighting an enormous pandemic. And hopefully, next time we speak, we will have a world that has returned to normal, at least in a certain way.